Veteran New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman has long been an influential voice on issues relating to Israel and the Middle East. But you certainly could say he's stepped it up several notches in recent months by using his editorial platform to fervently advocate against the current Netanyahu coalition and its proposed judicial reforms and support the protest movement against it. Friedman has called on his fellow U.S. Jews to, quote, save Israel from an internal Israeli threat manifested by the government itself. He's lobbied the Biden administration and the Saudi monarchy on the issue, and he's drawn the wrath of the Netanyahu government and its supporters. Well, joining us now is New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman, speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Friedman, thank you for joining us. First of all, you yourself have said that this government and its policies, especially the judicial reforms, are drawing from you an unprecedented reaction. Why is that, briefly?
Well, because I think Israel's democracy is at stake. Just the way that hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting for over the last half a year have felt. So I don't think there's any question about that. That's why I've gotten involved.
All right. Well, your involvement so to a degree that it was reported that you spoke with, for example, the group of Israeli Air Force pilots who are protesting and even threatening not to do their reserve volunteer duty if these policies continue. Can you maybe speak a little about what you had to say to them?
All kinds of groups of Israelis from the democracy movement have reached out to me to convey the depth of their feelings, to express support for people who share this concern with the fate and future of Israel's democracy. I listened to them, answered questions about American politics, and I've done it for lots of people, lots of groups in Israel and elsewhere.
Right. Now, you've also appealed and addressed directly the U.S. government, the Saudi government. This is one of the quotes from one of your pieces. Quote, so I want to appeal directly to President Biden and the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Do not let Netanyahu make you as useful idiots. You cannot have normalization with an Israeli government that is not normal. It will never be a stable U.S. ally or Saudi partner. And right now, Israel's government is not normal. Now, of course, you've been an advocate of Israeli-Saudi normalization. You've even played something of a role, a mediating role, or however you want to put it, in that. Why are you advocating it against it now?
I'm not advocating against it at all. I'm advocating that Saudi normalization with Israel will only serve Saudi interests, Israeli interests, and American interests if Saudi conditions that normalization in terms that will preserve a two-state solution. I believe if Saudi Arabia does that, it will be good for Saudi Arabia, it will be good for America, good for stable Israeli-Palestinian relations. I believe if it doesn't do that on those terms, it will have a hand in killing the peace process, killing the two-state solution, and enabling a government that in Israel that I think is not engaged in a healthy democratic enterprise.
But let me ask you, you say Israel is not a normal government. You're speaking to the Saudis. That is a monarchy far from democratic norms. The Saudi government has its own interests. And there are those who would argue that any kind of agreement could help at least push policies of this Israeli government, or maybe one that comes after it, towards more in the direction you would like to see.
Well, sure, I'd love to see normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I think it'd be great if it happens, but the terms and conditions on which it happened really matter. And that's what I'm focusing on. Will it preserve a two-state solution? And will it preserve Israel as a healthy democracy? I've written so much about Saudi Arabia over the years, critical, that to suggest I'm not interested in their government, is a little silly. But that's not what's at stake right now. I don't even know if I will support the U.S. part of the Saudi deal because we haven't even seen the details on that.
Right. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the criticism that you've received from the both supporters of the Netanyahu government in the U.S. And, of course, even members of it here. Danny Danon, the Likud Knesset member, former Israeli ambassador to UN, even penned an open letter to you. I spoke here in the studio earlier today with Mr. Danon. I just wanted to hear a brief quote from him and let you respond to it.
How can he call the President of the United States not to meet with our Prime Minister? That's not done. Netanyahu was elected by the people of Israel, and you should respect, even if you don't support the prime minister or you don't think he's doing the right things, but you should respect him. When a leader of another country is coming to the US and meets with President Biden, you don't look at what the government is saying and what happened. I can give you a list of dozens of leaders who met with President Biden, and I'm sure Mr. Friedman is not happy with their policy as well.
Well, your response to that, it's one thing to criticize Israel or the current Israeli government, certainly, but these critics are saying you're undermining relations by, for example, lobbying President Biden not to even perhaps meet with Benjamin Netanyahu.
First of all, Biden wants to meet with Netanyahu tomorrow. I think it's fantastic. I hope they do, and I hope the president uses that opportunity to lay down what he has said to me personally and publicly, that he thinks what Israel is doing, what this government is doing, which is forcing through a gigantic change in Israel's legal structure without a consensus, is a really bad thing. A really bad thing for Israel, a really bad thing for the stability of Israel and for future Israeli-American relations. So I don't really care about that at all. I think there's a little misunderstanding here, Calev, and that I haven't seen Danny Danone's piece. I don't know where he's written it. But it's not about me. Everything I am saying, everything I am advocating has been completely reflective of what a majority of Israelis, by every poll, have been saying, who have come out in the streets for over half a year. All I have done is made sure that their views, their aspirations, their fears for Israel's democracy are fully understood by the American public, by the readers of the New York Times, and hopefully by people within the administration. That's all I'm doing. And I am going to keep doing it. I'm not tired of doing it all. I'm very proud of doing it. And yes, I get criticism. I get criticism from Israelis. Do you know how many Israelis have written me and thanked me for what I'm doing to get their message across when the Israeli embassy doesn't do it, when AIPAC doesn't do it? So criticism, that comes with the job.
Tom, let me ask you about AIPAC, because you directly criticized them in print, saying they should be speaking out on this issue. But AIPAC is an organization that says they advocate on behalf of Israel and whatever the current government is. Let's talk about them and the American Jewish community, how they're reacting to this.
You know, absolutely, that's the AIPAC's job. But I think the AIPAC stands for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Who is the I in AIPAC now? Is it the government, or is it the Democracy Defense Protest Movement? How can AIPAC say we just represent the government when you have a Democracy Defense Protest Movement on the streets for half a year, and AIPAC brings an American delegation to Israel of Congress people and doesn't connect them with that I in AIPAC? That's all I'm saying. I'm glad they meet with government people, but they should meet with the whole spectrum.
All right. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, thank you so much for joining us on I-24 News, and Shana Tova. Happy Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. And if you want more great content like that from I-24 News, just hit the subscribe button. It's as easy as that.